of what is a global online event. We are quite pleased with sort of the outcome and the trajectory of the event as a whole. And definitely the diversity and the impact of the panels and the groups that are represented is an area that we're really pleased with. I want to start just with a traditional acknowledgement. I know we have representation globally. We have, because the conference itself is originating in Australia, and a common practice is in land acknowledgement, and just to pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land, where individuals in whatever location they are gathering and meeting, and pay respects to the elders past and present, and certainly to any First Nations representatives that are here today. This is our third annual conference. We've done, last year, I promised that the next one would be in person, and we're all here online, so clearly that was an outright lie. But I do want to say next year we'll be in person. So we're looking forward to planning and getting something a little more, present-based, if you will. We are currently, I think, sitting just under 1,500 attendees or registrants in total. That's our max out limit. So at 1,500, that's sort of where things will shut down. So our expectation is we'll get there in a reasonable time frame before essentially probably the end of the keynote, because our numbers seem to be ticking up fairly quickly. We have really broad representation. These are individuals that come from a range of backgrounds, a range of areas of expertise, and so on, and primarily representing sort of the academic field, some startup representation. We have corporate learning and development, administrators, and a range of government agencies, defense agencies, and so on that are also represented. So it's a really broad group, and you'll see that for those of you that have spent a little bit of time looking at the discussion forums, you'll see that, or the threaded introduction areas in Whova, you'll see there's strong representation really from a broad number of areas. So hopefully you'll get a chance to connect and engage with a growing number of those individuals. It's important to emphasize, because this runs in two separate places, so to speak. The main presentation happens here in Zoom, but the balance or the rest of it happens in Whova, and the bulk of the discussion happens in Whova. So encourage you to get a little comfortable with that space. Unfortunately, sometimes when you first log into Whova, it feels like 1993 spamware, because all kinds of pop-ups come up wanting you to share. But once you navigate through that barrage of pop-ups, it's actually a pretty decent place to connect and to get to know some of your colleagues globally. And that's one thing we're really excited about, is that broad representation that we have. Now, a few reasons for this conference. I'll detail a little bit in a couple slides, but essentially we wanted to address the hype that is unfolding in this landscape. And those of you, and I know a number of colleagues, I'll get onto the program chairs in a little bit, but we've got individuals who are heavily involved in traditional educational data mining, learning analytics, data science, education, psychology, learning sciences, and a number of related fields. As a result of that, we are seeing a bit of a convergence in all those domains. And I'm seeing it in conferences that in the past used to be learning analytics, and now it's learning analytics with a heavier AI or machine learning focus. Or you see it in learning sciences, where there's a stream, a thread, or a panel, or other things moving in that direction. So the hype is real. And at some level, and the simple model I've always used is, if it's digital, it produces data. If you have data, you have analytics, and analytics is sort of purgatory for AI. And I think we're starting to see, especially the hype, if you've been tracking ChatGPT and other tool sets online, you're aware of just the enormous interest that it's being generated as AI starts to exhibit more and more what might be almost human level like intelligence. I think we also need to, especially in the education sector, many of my colleagues are with a learning analytics background, and that's an area that only continues to have greater interest educationally as well, is how do we use data to better support learners and to improve the experience and outputs of learners in general. And also this idea that, well, it's only going to become systemic dynamic, meaning as we see AI and related technologies increase, it's inevitable that we're going to start to see greater outputs from a systems level and from an AI perspective. What does that mean to how we teach and what we teach? And then, of course, the argument, and if you've been playing around with ChatGPT or any of the generative AI products now, you're starting to realize that, wow, this could be our most significant creation. And what does that eventually mean to our schooling systems, university systems, and so on? So a little bit of background on why we're here and what we're doing. So the Global Research Alliance for AI in Learning and Education was formed a number of years ago in response to these trends in AI and in response to our first several conferences that we held, or the first conference and then launched in with Grail. We hold a series of webinars and activities, sort of online engagement and sense making around AI and the implications of AI. We have 3 tiers set. There's charter members, which our keynote speakers institution, ASU, is one. We have a growing number of universities listed on the website as well. In Australia specifically, we have UQ, University of South Australia, and Monash, which are the primary organizing partners this year, as well as University of Texas Arlington, where we have representation in that group as well, and National University. The advisory board, currently at least, all the major globally funded AI and learning labs are represented on our advisory board, our scientific committee. Feel free to go to the website and have a look at who's represented there. And we do, as we are planning forward to more in-person activity, PhD students and exchanges and connection with center labs. In fact, those of you that are at the Learning Analytics and Knowledge Conference in Arlington in March of next year, that'll be our first in-person meeting of our charter member and our scientific committees. And so those of you that are interested in joining prior to that as an institution, please do let us know. These are the people that helped make the event a success this year. We did a few things a little bit differently from last year. We asked a group of people to sort of co-organize local panels, so we had better representation from, say, Asian regions, Latin American regions, and so on, just to get a slightly broader perspective and voice on who's involved and who's actively engaging in this space. And we expect over time that will only continue to grow in influence and impact, because as we begin turning our attention as the events launch now, we want to look at our next year in-person dynamic and the way that we manage those panels and build broader community in between the conferences themselves. And you'll have some follow-up emails on that after the conference and how to participate and stay engaged as things unfold. We've seen so far at least 4 critical areas unfolding in the space of analytics. One is the infrastructure one, perhaps slightly boring and often handed off to big tech, but this is what makes this space possible. The practices that are involved within the learning analytics space, this is everything related to teaching and learning and pedagogy, and certainly the research dynamics across all 4 categories are reflected here as well. We're also focused on skills, notably around AI literacy. So with University of South Australia's LIFT platform, we'll be launching an AI literacies program early in 2023, and we'll keep you all informed as that unfolds. But it's a broad question of, do we have the social capabilities as well as the technical capabilities and the management leadership capabilities to enact AI in various institutions? And that relates to the 4th area, which is the leadership and the institutional support that makes AI policies and planning possible. So that's a quick overview of the groups and the organizations. You'll hear from us in the Whova forums, and certainly you can email Grace or myself, at least short term, if you have any questions related to that. I'm really pleased to welcome our keynote speaker today. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so you can get her on the screen. She's got a fantastic bio and extensive work, and I know all of you will be familiar, at least come across her work in some capacity or another if you're affiliated with learning sciences, learning analytics, natural language processing, and related domains. She's the professor at the Department of Psychology, and she directs the Science of Learning and Educational Technology Lab, as well as the executive director of the Learning Engineer Institute at Arizona State University. You can go through the rest of her bio for greater detail, but she's absolutely an international expert in a range of fields and has outstanding capabilities to speak to us and to launch our 3rd annual conference around the impact of AI in learning. On a personal note, I've had the privilege on many occasions to interact with Danielle, and I find her to be absolutely fantastic and supportive, giving, and a really terrific mentor, certainly for new people entering a field of analytics, data science in education and related domains. So Danielle, thanks very much for agreeing to kick us off today, and welcome.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you. I'm going to just click on share to kick us off. I click on the right one. How's that look? Great.
Perfect.
All right. So before I get started, for those of you who don't really aren't familiar with my work, I want to go ahead and give just a brief overview of some of the work that I've done. I've focused quite a bit on reading and writing and then language, and on literacy technologies, developing literacy technologies for students as well as for researchers. So, for example, one of the technologies that we have built is called iStart. iStart provides students with comprehension strategy instruction. It's adaptive, it's interactive. It's undergirded with natural language processing. So we provide automated feedback for various strategies like self-explanation, question asking, and summarization. And it's also game-based. So there are games that allow students to practice using the strategies and practice using self-explanation and summarization and improve their ability to understand challenging text, particularly science text. One of the other tools is called Writing Pal. It also provides instruction on strategies for writing. So it focuses on various phases of writing, like pre-writing, bodybuilding, and revision. And it also is undergirded with natural language processing, gives automated feedback using automated evaluation of essay quality, as well as automated evaluation during some of the games. And it provides writing practice as well as game-based practice. So both iStart and Writing Pal, my focus in my research has been on addressing problems. So these are just two examples, but the issues that we're really focused on is on helping students to understand challenging, low cohesion texts that are required in courses. And for Writing Pal, many students have far fewer skills than you might realize in basic writing. And so addressing that, Writing Pal is intended to address that issue. I also, in our research, we attempt to think about the needs of multiple stakeholders. So, for example, for the student, of course, it's providing adaptive tutoring, but we also focus on building teacher interfaces that allow the teacher to and the instructor to choose which lessons and modules the students may engage in, and an experimenter interface allows researchers to investigate and control parameters. So we focused on building tools that can be used by experimenters to conduct studies on reading and writing. We have a great deal of research on them. They work, they enhance comprehension strategies in writing, they improve comprehension in writing, because they're game-based, they also, and because they effectively help students to improve their skills, that we see more positive attitudes. Another tool that we focused on are natural language processing tools. Cometrics is just one of them, but probably the most well-known. Our focus is on helping researchers to conduct research using natural language processing. So we've been building tools for the last 2 decades to help researchers achieve that goal and to better understand language in whatever domain and research questions that they have. So, for example, in Cometrics, it looks at linguistic properties. So linguistic features relating to readability and quality of text. You might want to look at lexical sophistication, syntactic complexity, cohesion. Cohesion has always been a big focus of ours because of some of my earlier research that looked at the effects of and the benefits of providing more cohesion in text. And then also semantics. So we've been focusing on building tools that have semantic models and are able to infer the quality of text semantically in various ways. And across this research, we've been combining machine learning and natural language processing to predict a wide number of things, including quality scores, component scores, individual differences, and just a broad array of target constructs. So aside from that, thinking about more broadly our field, the last 3 decades, we've seen substantial advances. Educational technologies have shown to have very large potential in orchestrating learning interactions, augmenting human capacity, and in revealing learning. And if you are interested in a couple of reviews of this literature, and I highly recommend 2 papers that have recently come out, one by Baker et al. And one by McCarthy et al. This is a shameless plug, though, for my journal, Technology, Mind, and Behavior, which I also encourage you to have a look at if you're interested in various issues regarding technology, mind, and behavior. So moving on from that, so now that was just to give you a background and kind of give you an idea of what I do. I forgot to tell people who already know what I do to go have get a cup of coffee. But for those, now I'd really like to dig in to talk about the broader issue of leveraging AI and learning engineering in large-scale learning sciences. So it was a couple of years ago, I was participating in a grant proposal that in collaboration with a group, a number of groups. One was OpenStax and a number of people. And we were talking about how to think about the various foci of the researchers. And it was really quite diverse, and quite a few people were doing different things. And I started thinking about this in terms of this landscape of learning sciences, and thinking about how researchers are targeting these various factors, student factors, contextual factors, as well as outcomes in our research field. And kind of drew out this framework in thinking about the various things that people are doing in our field. And hopefully you can find yourself in some way, if you are in this field, of what kinds of things you've looked at in your research. So I myself, I've looked at quite a few things having to do with prior knowledge and skills, and the effects of knowledge and skills on performance, like comprehending and writing. I've also looked at learning content. So the effects of, I've done some work in math and also in text complexity, and also in text, as you saw, we're building educational technologies to provide feedback and prompts, and that also involves quite a bit of learning analytics and predictive analytics. And so you can think about this framework as research to understand, research to build, research to predict. And so, for example, if you are in the field of learning sciences or cognitive sciences, you might be doing research that is really focused on learning to understanding these processes and these factors. Some people are more on the ed tech side, the engineering and in curriculum and instruction, and they're building learning environments and learning tools. And then on the other side, you also have many researchers focused on predicting. So for example, we can be predicting student factors. So for example, we've done quite a bit of work on predicting knowledge and skills, and predicting various aspects of the student. We also want to predict outcomes. So sometimes we're using those student factors to predict outcomes, both short-term and long-term, both behavioral engagement, learning, retention over time, transfer of learning. And then in turn, we often use those predictions and those algorithms to undergird and to enhance computer-based learning environments and various tools that we're building. And so one of the questions that we've thought about is, in this vast landscape of research, and we know a lot about learning, we know a lot about student factors and contextual factors, is thinking about the question of why do so many studies fail to replicate and scale? Quite a few studies haven't been brought to scale, but we also see that many studies do not replicate. And it could be due to several factors like, not doing the study in the same way, or contextual factors. One of the things, though, that I've been thinking about is that learning sciences is often focused on just a few factors. That it's that the studies are often focused on supporting one theory or a set of theories, or disproving a theory, rather than on thinking about this broad landscape of factors that may be operating in our learning environments, and understanding this broad landscape and its interactions may help us to better understand and enhance learning and empower learners, in essence. And so, in essence, what I'm saying is that understanding, predicting, and scaffolding learning in complex environments is going to require looking at multiple factors across multiple contexts. And this is why, for the past few years, I've been really focused on the need for large-scale data. But one of the problems we have, and the problems we face, is that there are often walls around student data. So we've called this the balkanization of digital learning platforms. In essence, there are select individuals who have a great deal of data about students. They're compartmentalized within each platform, and they only represent a slice of a student's experience and behavior. And also, data are usually only available through ad hoc requests, either to the digital learning platform or for the larger data sets. Many researchers are shut out of platform-based research. What we need, and what we've been working for the last few years, are large-scale research and development infrastructures that open up data to external researchers and link also a variety of digital learning platforms at different educational levels, and enable researchers to conduct research in scalable manners. Why? Because many of us hold that in order to have a complete picture of the student over the long term, we need an inclusive research infrastructure, and community support. So for the last year, we've been working on the ASU Learning at Scale digital learning network platform. What we're doing is we're developing foundational infrastructure and protocols to connect the wide range of data available in the ASU data ecosystem. These are data on achievement, learning, persistence, really a wide range of data. And we're making those data accessible to researchers both within and outside of ASUs. And it's important to note that one of the big challenges of doing this is that you must honor both institutional and individual privacy. But we want to do that so that it can be examined, these data can be examined through exploratory and experimental methods. Our challenges has been or was that there really aren't widely adopted protocols. And so what we're doing is that we are creating an aggregated data warehouse and a platform that helps researchers to access these data. So ASU is really an ideal place to do this, to create this platform. It has an access to large scale data. Many of you might not know that ASU is the largest, one of the largest universities in the world, but it is the largest university in the United States. It serves well over 100,000 undergraduate students, as well as K through 12 students. And the students are quite diverse. For example, over 50% in the students registering in 2021 are identified as students of color. 33% are eligible for a Pell Grant. For those outside the United States, that means that they have financial needs. And we have the first generation students have nearly quadrupled since 2002. So it's quite a large and diverse population of students. We also boast 87% acceptance rate. So it's an inclusive with a mission of serving all students for undifferentiated success. So if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about ASU, there is this website called asu.edu facts. And so there are many, many tables that will give you an idea of the of students at ASU and their courses. So for example, you could dive in and look at enrollment by college and department. And if you did that, you would see something like this. And so, for example, if you looked and then dug in deeper and looked at engineering, of course, we have quite a big engineering department. If you looked at that, then you might see that, for example, you have minority and non-minority of 35.4%. Our objective is to increase those numbers, and we are succeeding in doing so. So you'll see that for first-year students by college in 2021, we're up to 45.6%. And that number is increasing this year. So anyway, this is just to get you and give you an idea of the kinds of data you can that are already public-facing and available online. So there have been a number of studies that have leveraged the ASU data. I'm just going to flip through these just so that if you want access, this is just saying you could have access to these. Here's another two. So very interesting studies. However, it required, quite a lot of labor-intensive work to have access to these data and build the databases. We're trying to facilitate that, make it easier for more researchers to access data within the ASU data warehouse, and also, in turn, to conduct studies. So we're starting off by building a data table that is reflective of the student profile, another of the student trajectory, and another for the course profile. We're also leveraging the fact that we've done quite a bit of work on natural language processing, and so we're going to have available both discussion boards as well as written assignments. So I'll mention that this is part of the IES digital learning platforms research to enable efficient educational research. This part of this network, which is being led by Digital Promise and Empirical Education with a group called CERNet. And my guess is you're going to hear about that in another talk a little bit more. So in this first round of funding, they have funded 2 math digital learning platforms, Mathian Assessments, one platform that provides open materials, textbooks, OpenStax, another Canvas and Terracotta, which is focused on connecting. Terracotta connects to Canvas to enable researchers' ability to conduct research. And then, of course, ASU Learning at Scale, which we are leading. And so my point is that there really isn't a silver bullet, and that we need to understand multiple factors across multiple contexts, but that also involves or requires looking at these data with a pluralistic lens and with multidisciplinary and collaborative teams. And so for that, I turn to learning engineering. So that's another field that I've been focused on more recently. In essence, it kind of defines me and the kinds of work that I've done for the last 20 years, except that there are some very important differences in the sense that there are some key ingredients to learning engineering. One is that it requires large-scale data, or it behooves learning engineering to have large-scale data. And it also is focused on knowing what matters. So creating predictive algorithms that analyze data to make better predictions. That was kind of circular, but also taking action. So what is learning engineering? It is the application of evidence-based principles from education and behavioral sciences combined with computational and design methodologies in the computer sciences to create engaging and effective learning experiences, support the difficulty and challenges of learners as they learn, and in turn come to better understand learners and learning. And if you don't know a great deal, or even if you do know a great deal about learning engineering, I highly recommend the Learning Engineering Toolkit by Goodell, and that was just published. It is what I would call a page turner, a really good book. So I really think that that is the value of learning engineering. It's an approach of people working together to solve complex problems in complex environments. And I'm turning toward leveraging concepts in learning engineering to orchestrate and enhance learning within the context of ASU. And so I'm really happy to announce that we are launching the ASU Learning Engineering Institute. This will be launched in the spring. And as it's a unique opportunity at ASU, as I've mentioned, we have this large foundational data, a large amount of data, and many, many students, many courses. And we also have this really great infrastructure at ASU that links up what there are now called enterprises. So there's academic enterprise, knowledge enterprise, learning enterprise, and there's what was UTO, and which is called the enterprise technologies, and then also Ed Plus, which runs our online aspect, online learners for ASU. What our task is to link these various to faculty, instructors, and students, external researchers, in order to conduct studies and conduct research leveraging the ASU data. So just a brief overview, what the ASU Learning Engineering Institute will do, our objective is going to be to focus on multiple factors and focus on actionable questions and action-oriented goals. One aspect of learning engineering is to attempt to move away from slow-moving studies that are really rely on an entire semester to complete the studies. Of course, you have to do these studies, but also focus on rapid iterations as well as large-scale quasi-experimental studies. But our objective is to yield actionable results. So things that, questions that address problems and have potential action and to help students and instructors. So one of the things that I have in mind for this is something called LEAPS, so Learning Engineering Action Pods. The point of this is that is to focus groups of researchers and support staff, core personnel, on questions that can be taken and answered from multiple directions and in various ways. So working together to solve problems in creative and innovative ways. So that it's more of an iterative design process. So to conclude, one of the things that we have seen is that we are siloed. We tend to be siloed. We have researchers, educators, and educational companies. Of course, there are other silos, but we really need to work together and to break down those silos so that we can work together to solve problems and empower learners. So, in essence, my talk is really about engaging in collaborative research and implementation. What I've been focused on for the last 2 years is building infrastructures, including the Learning at Scale platform, working with others to link up digital learning platforms. So I hope to be able to have that will come to fruition. And then also now we're embarking on the Learning Engineering Institute that will help to put together the data that we have in order to facilitate our ability to conduct research and conduct empirical studies in this context. If you have questions about Learning at Scale, here is our address, learningatscale@asu.edu. What I want to emphasize also is that IES has just put out a call for research. And so hopefully, if you haven't, hopefully you've already seen it. If you haven't seen it, please have a look at the IES site for the call for research. It is, they are funding multiple projects that link to those 5 digital learning platforms. And we hope to that they'll do the same call in the future, but also contact us if you are interested in conducting studies at ASU. We hope to hear from you. So in closing, thank you. A few plugs for some of our past books, as well as the Technology, Mind, and Behavior website. If you are interested in using iStarter Writing Pal or any of our other tools, have a look at adaptiveliteracy.com. And then if you're interested in any of our publications, we try to make them available at soleillab.asu.edu. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle, for fantastic overview, and I think an outstanding opening keynote for the event as a whole. I particularly like the nicely integrated framework that you brought in with your expertise in learning sciences, educational technology, and then the move toward AI and AI-related considerations. And one of the things that we have been focusing on as well, and we have a colleague at UniSA, Srečko Joksimovic, that's been working on something that I think would be good overlap with what you shared, this idea of data for artificial intelligence research, namely that research infrastructure of data and data access is quite central to longer term ability to do some of the things that in the more sophisticated framework that you're sharing. And the work that you're launching now at ASU sounds outstanding. So we have a few questions that have come up in the conversation, and one of the considerations, I'll just throw these out to you sort of as I see them on my screen. One individual stated that was expecting more interdisciplinary research to be missing piece, but now that we have these large-scale integrated data sets, is the interdisciplinary research solved or at least less of an issue? And from the last slide that you brought up where you've got the ed tech companies, the practitioners, the researchers, or that sector, I would suggest that means no, but what would be your view of the interdisciplinary? Is that a solved problem?
Just by having the data sets? Is that the core?
Yeah, this question specifically said that given the integrated data and large quantities of it, that the interdisciplinary challenge is addressed, or is asking if it is.
Yeah, I mean, I categorically no. What you do with a data set is often driven by your assumptions theoretical assumptions and your own theoretical questions. Data don't drive questions, people do. And I think that it's very hard for an individual to approach a data set using a pluralistic lens, in the sense that we all come with our own biases. We all come with our own backgrounds and ways of thinking. I think that, learning sciences has really traditionally focused on proving and disproving singular theories. And that's great. It advances our understanding of learning, but learning engineering is quite different in the sense that an underlying assumption is that you cannot solve educational problems with one approach or one theory. And along with that, I don't think I've ever engaged in a project that didn't include people from different backgrounds and different domains and theoretical perspectives. And I think that's critical to advancing our science.
Great, thanks. We have a follow-up question that's somewhat related to that, but it's this idea of collecting sufficient data on learners, both breadth and depth, to be able to predict and also to advise, the learner and what needs to happen. So the specific question is, what is your perspective on including the learner as an active participant in interpreting their data and finding ways they can employ those insights to inform their learning?
I think that's a really great point. And that's another kind of underlying assumption in the field of learning engineering is it's human-centered, including both the teachers and the learners in the process. I think it's a really great way of thinking about moving forward and involving students in the ASU Learning Engineering Institute. We have plans to involve students both in conducting research, but also as kind of thinking of ASU as a community of learning engineers, both from the student side and from the instructor side and the researcher side. So understanding that process, doing focus groups, talking to learners, and thinking about those data and the findings with the students, I think is really, really important.
I'm going to switch to just a couple of personal questions, and then there's a few more coming. I think we have probably about another 10 minutes left for those of you that would like to ask additional questions. And I should emphasize as well that we're kind of wall to wall for those of you that are attending. And we have people from all over. So I know there's some of you that'll be thinking bedtime soon, and some of you are going to be heading to your second cup of coffee. But one of the questions that's come up, and I have, it's entirely possible I may have had opinions about learning engineering as a concept and as a domain. And part of it is maybe the word, right? When we think of rich social processes and we're interacting with others, it's like, we're going to engineer a relationship. Right. It seems like the language of engineering is the structured concept versus some of the more organic, ephemeral dynamics, the qualia of learning and existence doesn't fit into an engineering profile. But if you were to describe to someone who, say, is hypothetically cynical, why would you, or how would you address that view of engineering as a potentially problematic term?
So I view engineering not from a perspective of being purely mechanical or not unhuman, so to speak, but from a perspective of how to put together the various components that we have and fit them together. And that's the engineering analogy that we want to emphasize, is putting things together as if it were mechanical, but of course, knowing that there are humans. That's why human-centered learning engineering is critical. The we also focus on both quantitative and qualitative research. So looking at the qualitative side, focus groups, but also looking at what people are saying and thinking about things in different ways is important. Most of my research has always had some qualitative aspect because it's about language. So in order to look at language, you have to approach it qualitatively first. Yeah, I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that's kind of a
I think, what the good part is, our very next panel is actually looking at exactly this topic of learning engineering. And so there's an outstanding group of attendees at that panel that I'm sure will deal with, talk about this in more detail, because it is something that is more and more prominent in conversations, learning engineering and some of those dynamics. So I think that's been, a growing momentum, and the way it's reflected in both funding agencies and other outputs indicates that it's a term and a concept that's here to stay. And it's one that I think researchers need to grapple with. And as Wittgenstein says, we need to create a shared understanding of what the word means, not linguistically what the word actually is, perhaps from today's perspective.
Yeah.
One of the things that recently, so let's just throw it to you, you have an outstanding career in terms of impact and research that you've done, and a lot of it's playing at sort of a little bit of that systems level, and the engineering lab, the learning engineering lab that you have coming out reflects that as well. Recently, with the ELAI Institute that was funded by NSF, I did a talk at their sort of retreat or get together where I looked at two societies, or one society and one upcoming or side organization. And the first one was Society for Learning Analytics Research, which I was involved with a group of peers in helping coordinate and organize. And then the second is GRAIL, the Global Research Alliance for AI and Learning and Education. And one of the interesting effects is, with your talk and with NSF being such a huge funding agency and IES out of the US, for a lot of people internationally, that there's a conversation that they're on the outside looking in. And so the reason I provide that as a context is you have these professional associations and organizations that are trying to drive conversation, trying to create collaborations across borders. What would you advise, let's say specifically from a GRAIL end and from an AI researcher and AI practitioner end? How would we better make global impact, global connections, even though in many instances funding is driven locally? For example, Ingi Molnar recently had a 60 million euro lab funded that is going to tackle the concepts generally of AI in learning and education. NSF has funded so far at least 3 large organizations and labs that target AI in learning. There's speculation of different parts of the world similarly putting resources in those areas. How do we support that globalization of that conversation?
Well, I do think that it involves infrastructures higher than us, in the sense that, but a good example is ASU. ASU is strongly focused on building those connections to globally, so to multiple parts of the world. I myself also want to, I will seek to build out the Learning Engineering Institute to help others, to scaffold other institutions across the world, and also in the United States, to build these kinds of data infrastructures and platforms, because there are multiple challenges in achieving that goal. I myself have always worked with researchers around the world, and our ability to digitally connect with people more easily really facilitates that. The more that we are able to do that and see things from different perspectives and work together globally, I think will enhance learning sciences, learning engineering. So, I mean, that's why, GRAIL is such a great project, and it's an opportunity for us to connect with people across the world. So I think we're moving in that direction. In terms of building connections that cross borders. And cultures, and I hope to see more of it.
Great, and I think that's one of the things. Certainly, you've been very globally active, and ASU was one of the first organizations that joined Grail as well. And so we'll throughout the conference we'll share some of the details of what we're doing with Grail, and I think some of the work that I think we're a little jealous of is your ability, or ASU's ability, to sort of pull this large scale set of data together that allows researchers to be able to interrogate a range of different data sets to try and get a better understanding of what's the experience of students, what makes success work in one context but not work in another. And at the end of the day, once you have a quality data set, and you have the ability for an infrastructure of access to that data that you make available to researchers, you have the ability to start pulling out and putting out a series of papers that are just not possible until you have that sort of partially boring technical detail addressed. But once that's in place, it's a fantastic opportunities for PhD students, for existing researchers, for people new to, say, learning analytics or AI or EDM or learning engineering spaces to come in and start making sense and working with that data. Okay, I'm going to do a couple of quick questions here, and then we can move toward wrap up. One individual asked, which is a common question, I'm sure you've heard many times, because it's such a critical one. So I don't want to diminish it at all, but it's this idea of how will student data be protected in the Learning at Scale project, given that the full data set could make individuals identifiable?
Yeah, it's a critical question. It's pretty much the biggest challenge we have, and something that we discuss more often than anything. And also working with the IRB office and lawyers and discussing how this can be done. At one level, of course, individuals' identity will be masked. We'll use hashes for that. And at another level, we are developing the scripts so that if the intersectionality of the data lead to a very small n, then we won't be able to afford those analyses. For the purpose of describing a data set, I will say that data about an individual right now, if you ask for a data set, or maybe last year, if you asked for a data set, you probably would have received a data set that was with which you might be able to identify individuals based on the intersectionality of the data. What we're also not doing is we're not releasing data if it's not part of the question. We will give aggregated data for basic demographics if the question isn't about demographics. So we're building out tables that can be used to describe a wide variety of aspects of a data set, but won't necessarily release that at the individual level. So that's for the Learning at Scale project. What we're also working on is another project that has not been funded officially yet, and so I'm not quite allowed to talk about it. But the notion is of building enclaves, so data enclaves, where when we are as we move forward, we will house the data in an enclave such that you can see examples of the data, and you can have data, sample data or simulated data. But what you won't see is the actual data. You will submit the data analyses to the data behind an enclave. And so that's another direction that we're going. So, and there are various solutions to this that I know you have pursued, and you're thinking about, and other people are thinking about it, including simulated data and various things like that. It's the enclave data that we will be working toward.
Great. Well, thank you very much for an outstanding kickoff, Danielle. So join me in, virtual applause, or just stand at your desk and clap, or do the digital version. I just want to quickly share what's going on next. We are fairly sort of wall to wall today, as I mentioned. Actually, for the next 3 days, we do have an outstanding program coming. So Danielle's kicked us off. We have a learning engineering panel that starts right away. As you know, each session has a different access point. So if you're in Whova, that's where you can log in and sort of access what's involved there. So that's going to kick off. We have one of the NSF institutes that I mentioned earlier coming up. I know I saw Jeremy in the chat before. We've got a number of panels around human-centered AI happening as well, with an Australian cohort leading, or at least heavily involved there. We have a keynote from Chris Dede that's involved in the ALO group as well. And then we have a couple of panels to conclude the day. One particular I think is quite exciting is this idea of early career AI learning researchers, and just what do pathways look like, and what are some things that students in particular are concerned about. And then finally, wrapping up a panel on sort of where things are going and the problems that groups or organizations are facing. So we have a lot of conference coming your way. So thanks everyone for joining us. I'm going to end this session here and look forward to seeing you throughout the event. Please dive into Whova, ask questions. You can email Grace or myself. I'll just drop my email in here if you have any questions or concerns randomly, and we'll pick things up from there. And those of you that are interested in joining Grail, again, just let me know as an institution if that's on your radar. Thanks all. Enjoy the rest of the event. And thank you very much, Danielle.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.